There came a time when God said to Joshua, "You're old and you're tired." So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to divide up the land, the inheritance, to all the different children from the different tribes. And when it came to the tribe of Manasseh, which is going to be one of Joseph's children, with the second being Ephraim, right? Those folks, they said like, "Oh, we got a lot of people, right? Why don't we get more land," right? And particularly when you look at the landmass that they were given, they actually were given quite a bit of land, but it was inhabited at the time, right? The Canaanites inhabited a lot of the land. Particularly what they had was a mountain. And Joshua, to me, is so different than Moses, because I think Moses would have looked at him and said, "Deal with it," right? But Joshua knew the value of a mountain and what God could do with a mountain. And let me tell you what I mean by that, right? There was a time where Joshua was fighting a battle and he fought all day. And in front of him was this mountain. And on top of the mountain was his best friend, Moses, with his arms raised up praying. And the priests around Moses would make sure his arms were raised, because as long as that was happening, right, the battle was turning in their favor. And if his arms went down, then Joshua started to lose. No one knows that better than the witness Joshua, who's on the battlefield. So he had to notice that every time he catches his friend out of the side of his eye, like encouraging him, that he keeps winning. And then all of a sudden he does it, and then he does. And finally, he wins the war. So that mountain meant a ton to him. It represented an altar to God that the priests were praying on. The second mountain that Joshua would come across was Mount Sinai. When Moses went up, he spent weeks up there receiving instruction, receiving divine insight from God for the people. Well, Joshua didn't go back down. He camped the entire time waiting for Moses to come back down. So that mountain became to represent time with God, survival through tough circumstance, but also patience, right? Waiting for his friend and his brother, being between the people who are having their own little problems down there, and then Moses with God. Think about what kind of place that is, to stand between heaven and earth, to stand between the angels and man. Joshua had a special place, and that mountain represented that place that he witnessed both heaven and earth, right? So it represented an altar to God to win the war, and it also represented very much his stance in life, standing as a messenger between heaven and earth. And then the third mountain, right, is really a Jericho, the mountain of a city that stood in Joshua's way. There was no way to get through. He sent spies in, the walls had to come down, and they did at the sound of God's greeting, right? Trumpets blare, the walls fall. And Joshua learns that even though the mountain represents such majesty and power, it also represents nothing compared to God. God is everything, because God can move any mountain. So Joshua's response, when he responds to the tribe, right, who's complaining about being on the mountain and these inhabitants, he says to them, "Forget their iron chariots, cut down the wood, create the battle. The battle belongs to God, and with the mountain at your side, God will move that mountain and force those people out." And that insight of the mountain and its importance and how God is more important and can move it comes from Joshua's journey, which ends in the end of Joshua here in the inheritance to the people. So he was probably excited to get back to his wingman Moses and hang up in heaven. Joshua's journey comes to an end. Chad and Cheesman, happy Sunday.